So that was incredible. I also went to the Redwood Forest, which I'd never been to before. Has anyone been there? Yeah, that is just insanely beautiful. I thought that, I mean, I knew that it was going to be awesome, but there was a whole bunch of stuff that I'd never even considered before, like that there's no wind there, because the trees are so big that they just block all of the wind. And there was no wildlife either. Like in the forests in Maryland and Pennsylvania, where I grew up, there's there's deer and squirrels and everything. And so I expected to see wildlife, but there was none. It was like there was no wind, there was no time, there was no motion. It was like the time had just stopped and been frozen in the Jurassic era or whatever. And there is wildlife there, but it's all up in the canopy, like 300 feet above you. Obviously not deer, but still, like, it just blew my mind, and I felt so small by those trees. I felt like a tiny little pixie, you know, like a little fairy, and I was like, oh, it's fairyland! And as I was running around frolicking through fairyland, I found this fallen tree, and there was like a hollow knot in it that I could crawl through, and it looked, I knew that they had filmed, was it The Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi? I don't remember which one, where with the zoom in through the forest, like they'd filmed that there, so I knew that I had sort of that in my mind, and it kind of felt like that. But when I found this tree with the hollow knot, it looked exactly like the cave on Dagobah, where Yoda's telling Luke Skywalker, like, enter you must, face your fears. And so I'm like, oh, this is so cool, and I'm climbing through, and Luke Skywalker, I was like, oh yeah, and I decapitate Darth Vader, and then it turns out to be me, but then it's also my father, and like, oh, my biggest fear is that I'm becoming my father. And I didn't realize it was true until I said it. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. The whole time that I was doing this traveling, I was having epiphanies like that. I had been leaving my old life behind. The vision for the tour was not just to perform in every state, but to leave behind a life of self-betrayal and be reborn in some other place after a year-long gestation in my van womb. And I had set it up that way with like red curtains and a big comfy, so that when the light comes in, the whole place glows pink, and a big comfy down comforter to snuggle with. And it was really insane because I was in this like perfectly cozy little bed, and then I'd like get out of it and I'd be in a Walmart parking lot, or just parked on a street. It was really, really insane that I'm hiding in plain sight, but I was free. I had shelter, I had my van, but I had no house, I had lived in my house for 8 years back in Baltimore before I just walked away from it. And so it was this really cathartic experience of shedding my old life and all of my old fears and confronting these fears. And I got free. Free like I had never been before, free like I had never even imagined before. And there's something that nobody tells you about freedom, which is that freedom is fucking terrifying. Because you're completely vulnerable. You have to be vulnerable to be free. When we're kids, we learn to behave in a certain way so that our parents respond a certain way. If we want them to feed us or to love us when we're dependent on them, we have to behave in a certain way. And all throughout our lives, as we're growing up in school, we learn to behave a certain way, and we have this conditioning that we do when we're dependent on the adult world. And then once we become adults, we're no longer dependent on them, but we still have that conditioning. So when we encounter a new situation, we don't interact with it in the way that the situation necessarily calls for. We interact with it, we react to it the way that we were conditioned to do so. And the way that I had been conditioned was to be afraid and avoid it. We don't know what's going to happen, but I suspect I know what's going to happen, so I put up a guard to keep me from going down that path, and to keep me from going down that path. And all of these things that I thought were keeping me safe ended up just keeping me confined to this narrow little path. But to be free, to be open to whatever vulnerability may come, you have to clear away those things that you think are keeping you safe. And so I was doing a lot of that, and confronting all of these fears, and I realized that all fears are really the same fear. Does anybody have a fear they want to share? Yes?
When I drive on the freeway, I think the semis are going to fall over and crush me.
Okay.
I get that.
Fear of giant trucks falling over and crushing you. That, you don't know, that could happen. Well, what is your biggest fear?
Mine?
Yeah.
A lot, but cockroaches.
Cockroaches. Okay, why?
I don't know.
You don't know.
They're fast.
You just,
I don't know.
you don't know. Okay. What about you? What is your biggest fear? Other than being called out from the stage.
Fear that I will not succeed.
Fear of failure. That's a big one, yeah. Apparently the most common, or one of the largest fears, the second biggest fear that most people have is public speaking. Is getting in front of an audience, talking. And it's terrifying. It's second only to death. But what do they say you should do if you have to give a speech but you're afraid? Picture everyone naked, right? What if what you're supposed to do is get on stage in front of an audience and get naked? You feel completely vulnerable. But if you can do that, you can do anything. If you can conquer that fear, knowing that you could come on stage and the audience could hate you, or you could forget your lines, or your choreography, or the music doesn't work, or any number of things could happen, but you don't know, but you still have to take that leap of faith. The greatest fear, the fear of death, is really the same fear as stage fright. It's not the fear of the pain and the experience of dying that people have, as much as what comes afterwards. And because there's absolutely no way of knowing what happens after death, that's the fear. All fears are the fear of the unknown. People have faith because they don't know. People confine themselves to specific paths because it gives them the illusion of security in a future. Because they know, well, that future is not going to happen. I'm not going to be living on the street. I've got a job, you know. But all of those things are just an illusion of security because we can't know the future, and so we can't control the future. So to live in the moment, to be free, you have to make yourself completely vulnerable to whatever comes. And that's fucking scary. And since I do that, I had been doing that for 14 months, getting on stage to a new audience, people I didn't know, in a place I didn't know, not knowing where I was going to sleep, not knowing, you know, not knowing anybody in the town, just showing up and doing this thing. I got really sort of able to confront that fear of the unknown and embrace that spontaneity of just doing whatever comes, whatever comes. And so now there's only one thing that I'm really afraid of. Overzealous automatic flush toilets. Seriously, those things scare the shit out of me. I mean, maybe that's how they're supposed to work, but you know, like, I spent a lot of time in, you know, rest stops and stuff, and they've all got them there because they're sanitary, and like, you gotta go to the bathroom because you don't have one in your house. And so you get to like the toilet and it's got that red eye, you know, that little sensor there. Hal is real and he's watching you poop. And you know, you don't know like what kind of mood the toilet is in, you know, how it's gonna react, so you just drop around, you shuffle over there and like inch back, you know, like you don't even want it to know you're there. You're like, if it's that sensitive, maybe it won't notice if I just stay like at the front of the toilet, you know, but you can't. Shit like that, so you gotta like, you know, get comfortable and check Facebook, so you reach into your pocket to get, and when you bend down, you know, it sucks your throat out through your anus, and you know, splashing everywhere, and just like, fuck you, you know. And so, but if they've got automatic flush toilets, they've also got automatic flush hand dryers, you know, so you can't, like, it's not even paper towels, so you don't want to use all the toilet paper because it like falls apart all over your legs. And so you have to get out there and like, you know, get one leg upside down so you can just dry off your taint and while you're doing a handstand, pants up around your ankles, some trucker or like dad with his kid comes in and you're just like, good luck. So that's really my biggest fear, that I'm becoming my father.